This is the 13-inch MacBook Pro, the first MacBook Pro with Apple's M1 chip. And now, after using it for a few months, I really can't say anything bad about it. This is one of the best computers I've ever used. But I don't think you should buy one. Okay, so when I say that you shouldn't buy this computer, it's not because the MacBook Pro is a bad device. It's great. It's just that it's a little bit confusing in the line. When Apple introduced the M1 chip, they updated the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro 13, and the Mac Mini, and they all run the M1 chip. And that chip absolutely delivers. I don't have to belabor that point. I'm sure you have heard and seen that the M1 Macs perform extremely well. It's kind of the dream computer setup. You want something that's as powerful as possible, but also still lightweight and capable. Well, the M1 chip delivers that. For me, that's something I've been wanting in a laptop. I currently use a 16-inch MacBook Pro that's fully spec'd out, and I never use it as a laptop because it's just so big and heavy. I really just hate taking it with me, but I also like having the option, that occasional once every other week where I need to take it with me and use it as an actual laptop. But moving over to the 13-inch, I get very similar performance out of that, and it's actually a computer I can carry with me and take everywhere, and it's not, breaking my back. That's a little hyperbolic, but you know what I'm saying. But aside from that chip, this is the same MacBook Pro that we had before it. You still have the keyboard, which they have fixed and is great. You have the big trackpad, which is industry leading. You still have the touch bar. I'm one of those people that actually kind of likes the touch bar. I use it, although I can see its arguments for not being there. But if you want the touch bar, it's here. And you have your Thunderbolt USB-C ports. So it's great, right? But why should you not get this computer? And there's a few reasons, and it really comes down to timing when you want to buy this computer, and once you do, which one should you actually buy? And the biggest thing is that the MacBook Air exists. If you're looking to buy a computer right now and you want one with the M1 chip, the MacBook Air is a much better value. So the MacBook Air starting price is $300 cheaper than the starting price of the MacBook Pro, so $999 versus $1,299. But you're getting a very, very similar computer in the MacBook Air. The M1 chip inside is essentially the same. The only difference is the M1 chip in the base model MacBook Air is locked to 7 GPU cores instead of 8. The MacBook Pro also has a fan built in, whereas the MacBook Air doesn't, but I've really never heard it kick up. And while yes, if you want the best of the best, the MacBook Pro has that hardware. In real world use, I've used the MacBook Air as well with the MacBook Pro, and I mean, honestly, you don't notice a difference. I think the only point where you will see it is if you're doing really extended periods of high intensive tasks. So if you're exporting a really long and intensive video, in my case, then you'll start to see a little bit of a slowdown, but it's really not much of a noticeable difference. If the MacBook Pro did end up making a huge difference in performance in real world tasks and day to day, then there would be an argument. But in my use case, that's just not there. So you still get the great keyboard, you get the great trackpad, you get a great screen, 2 Thunderbolt ports, excellent battery life. I mean, the list is almost identical, and it makes the MacBook Pro feel like a MacBook Air Pro, which it's not a bad thing. It's just not the MacBook Pro you might be looking for. There's also the argument of what computer a professional should buy right now. If you're someone who would typically buy a MacBook Pro because it has more pro features, well, it doesn't really, because compared to the MacBook Air, like I said, very similar. But also the Apple Silicon architecture right now does have some issues. If you want dual displays, you can't do that. I have a storage RAID array, which I use for work, and that does not work currently with the M1 Macs. There have also been some people reporting that their apps just don't work in Rosetta, even though they probably should. This is still the beginning steps, and if you're a professional, you probably don't want to take that risk and get a computer that may not work for you. And then you might ask, well, what if I need a MacBook Pro? I want a higher end computer. Well, if you're one of those people, I would highly suggest waiting. The biggest reason I see not to get this computer is that it's the first generation M1 Mac, and granted, they have hit it out of the park. They are excellent. They do have some issues, but it does seem like Apple is very soon going to release an update to this computer and other computers in the line. So I think in this situation, it's actually worth waiting for those if you can. Of course, the standard rule applies here. If you need a new computer, there's always something new coming out. So whenever you need to buy one, buy the best that you can at that current time. So if you need to buy a computer right now, you want the MacBook Pro, go for it. But if you're kind of deciding what you want to get, this new MacBook Pro that's rumored to be coming out seems like the MacBook Pro that we've been actually wanting to have. Back when Apple announced the transition to Apple Silicon at WWDC 2020, they said they were on a 2-year timetable. So within 2 years, all of our devices will have a M1 or Apple Silicon version. So we know that the other products in the line will be updated, and we're going to get those more pro level machines. But not only that, if we look to Apple's history with these new devices, I think it's kind of safe to say that these current computers that we have, these M1 Macs, are not long for this world. They're going to get replaced pretty fast. I mean, take a look at the very first iPhone and iPad launches. Apple likes to release products with as many things as they're happy with as fast as possible, but that also means they iterate really quickly after that. The first iPhone was released, but then very quickly after that, the iPhone 3G was released with a completely new design. It had 3G, which was a major setback of the original iPhone. Same thing with the original iPad. They released it, it was kind of like a proof of concept. Here was what a tablet looks like. And then very quickly after that, the iPad 2 with a completely new design, a front-facing camera, a lot of changes that people were wanting. And you could tell Apple took a similar approach here with the new M1 Max. It's let's throw the chip in there, we already have the hardware, let's see how it works in the real world, and then we'll quickly, switch it up and make what we really want this computer to be. And the rumors back this up. In 2021, so this year, at some point we're supposed to see new MacBook Pros, both the small and large versions. This 13-inch MacBook Pro is supposed to get replaced with a 14-inch, which has been rumored for years now. But it's supposed to get a completely new design, kind of reminiscent to the iPhone 12, so squared off on the edges. And since this might be around 14 inches, there's rumors that we might see a mini LED display, which gives you much better contrast ratios and overall just a better display. It's also supposed to bring back pro features that a lot of us have been wanting, like an SD card slot, HDMI. MagSafe is also supposed to be making a return in some way, shape, or form. And for those of you that hate the touch bar, that's supposed to be going away as well and just be replaced with regular keys again. And of course, this is going to have Apple Silicon and possibly the next generation of Apple Silicon, which means faster and better performance. So this new well-rumored MacBook Pro is going to be substantially different and I think better than what we have now with the 13-inch MacBook Pro. Even though this current computer is still great, it's one of those rare times where I think it's worth waiting if you can. That being said, I've really enjoyed my time with the MacBook Pro. It gets me excited about the Mac again. It just kind of stagnated for the longest time, but now with these computers, they are fun, they are fast, and it gets me excited for what we're gonna see next. But if you did buy this computer like I did, don't feel bad because it's still an excellent device. It still does everything I need it to. It's just, if you're looking at getting one right now, I probably wouldn't.